But then in the end of chapter 4, there's a switch. And it goes from the parables to 4 miracles. And so following these parables which show how the kingdom will come, we get these miracles that show what the kingdom's going to be like. And we slowed down last week. We looked at just one of them, and that was Jesus calming the storm. And we're going to reference back to it this morning just a little bit. But I really do think, and I've said again and again and again, mostly to encourage myself, that there is value going through this book at what we've called Mark speed. If you slow down and you look at every one of these miracles, they're amazing miracles. And they just get larger and larger all the way to the raising of the dead when he raises Jairus' daughter. And Doc, they're so encouraging. But when you slow down, you miss a little bit. You miss, like, the theme of its writing. Like, it would be easy to slow down and miss the fact that these parables answer the question of what hope is there in the kingdom. When you get to this, it would be easy to miss the picture of that they show. And what they show is that this is what the kingdom is going to be like. And so we're going to try to pick it up again. And we're going to see 4 miracles. All of them are taught, and all of them we've heard, and all of them we probably could teach a Sunday school lesson on. And many of you could do it much better than I could, and I would love to listen to it. But here are the 4 we're going to look at. One, in chapter 4, verses 35 through 41, we looked at this last week. Jesus calms the storm. Then when you get into chapter 5, verses 1 through 20, Jesus cast out demons, the demon whose name is Legion because he was many. Then you get to chapter 5, verse 25, and we skipped a verse there, 21 through 24. But you get to 25 through 34, and Jesus heals a woman of a 12-year sickness. And then at the end of the chapter, Jesus raises a 12-year-old girl from the dead. Now, when we look at these miracles, what we really get to see is a glimpse of who he is. And when we see who he is, because we see what he's doing and what he wants to do, because you know what he does? Bruce, you know what God does? What he wants. You know why? Because he's God. So when we get to see what he does, we get to see a glimpse of who he is. And as we look at these miracles, what we're going to see is what he wants to do and who he is. We get to see his character through his actions. And so it gives us a glimpse of what kingdom life, what living under the rule of the king is going to be like. And when we begin to see this, it should encourage us to pray, as he's challenged us to pray, thy kingdom come. Even so, Lord, come quickly. Because we go through these parables, and I mean these miracles, and what we're going to see is just a quick glimpse. Doug, I want to spend my time on something here after we go through these. But a quick glimpse starts out this way. What will the kingdom be like? Well, we see from his actions, the first thing, the kingdom is going to be a place of no storms. All of creation, all of the order of creation is going to be transformed back to what it was. Imagine a world. I mean, we can't think of this world because this is the only world we know. But imagine a world that has no hurricanes. We don't have to start getting ready. We don't have to fear no earthquakes, no tornadoes. In Revelations, John gets to see a glimpse, and he says, the sea is like glass. There's no storms. We get to see a picture of this last week when we go through the end of the chapter, verse 37. And there arose a great storm of wind, and the waves beat into the ship so that it was now full. But when he rebuked the wind and the waves, it was all suddenly stopped. There was no time delay. It was eerily, the storm is over. The wind stopped. The wave stops. And that is what he brings. Complete calm. And so we get this picture. The kingdom of God will be a place of no storms. We're going to see in chapter 5 that it's going to be a place of no demons. Satan is cast out. We have a world without evil, without hatred, without manipulation, a world without violence, no temptation, no failure, no regret, no need for repentance. Oh, those things sound so good. We don't even understand what that is. A world without temptation. A world without evil. A world where we don't have to feel gullible if we don't doubt what somebody says. A world of truth. No hindrance. No struggle. No restraint. Can you imagine a world blessed with life living under the rule of the King? Then you go on, and we see in the picture where he heals the woman of the 12-year sickness, a world of no sickness. No cancer, no strokes, no Alzheimer's, no blindness, no deafness, no depression. Simply health and strength to pursue all God has for us, which we can't even imagine all God has for us. Every good gift, everything was created good for us. And then imagine a world with no death, no aging, no gut-wrenching goodbyes. Miss Pat, this is why we're encouraged to pray, thy kingdom come. But, and this is me. This is what goes on inside me. Oh, that's great. In fact, Doc, if you were up here teaching, I'd be like, amen. Got to say something so I don't go to sleep. I know that's what it's going to be like. Yep, that's good. Truthful. Confession's good for the soul. Because none of those seem real to me. The reality of the world that we live in is so far removed from kingdom life. The reality we live in is full of storms and evil and sickness and death and doubt and struggle. These are things I know of. So, Brother Jeremy, that's all great. But, well, we live in a fallen world. Why would we expect it to be any different? We live in a world that rejected the King. But we are to live looking forward to the day that the King returns, not as a lamb to the cross, but as the King to reign. And because of that, in the today, in the now and now, we submit ourselves. Looking forward to the day of no storms and no evil and no sickness and no death. But, again, me. Yeah, I know that too. Tell me what I'm supposed to do. I know I'm supposed to. But, don't forget, we're not waiting till the day that we live in his presence. You want to know what the good news is? The good news is we live in his presence every single day. So, when we face the storms of today, he's in the boat, just like he was with them. When we face the evil of today, great evil, and we do face great evil. Wrong is called right, and hatred and violence and deception. And why? He is with us when we face great evil. He will be with us when we go into surgery, or we see the doctor, or we deal with the medications, and even on the day that we look at our own death or the death of a loved one. He is there. Now, Doc, there will be a day that we live with him face to face, and we shall be made like him. But until that day, he has promised that he is with us every single day, every moment of the day, everything that comes through our life. And that is what we have to remember. So, there's an overview of these 4 miracles. Now, and I'm not saying we won't go back and look at these and slow back down. But, Bruce, there is a benefit in looking at them, Mark Speed. And that, I think, is this. there is one theme that goes through all four of these, and that is fear. And I don't want to miss that. There is a fear that Jesus brings, and there is a fear that Jesus relieves. And we get to see the fear that Jesus brings in the first two, and we get to see the fear that Jesus relieves in the second two, and we see how he relieves it. No. Oh, no, I did it this way. Angie hates it when I give them the notes and they're all out of order. Mark chapter 4, where we left off. This is after the parables. And let's see, Mark 4:40. And he said unto them, so this is after, all right, we know how this goes. Brother Wayne, they're in the boat. They go out on the sea. The storm comes. These mighty sailors are scared unto death. Scared to the point that they lost their mind and say, Master, do you not even care that we perish? Which we talked about, be careful throwing too many darts. How many times the doubt in my life is around the idea, Brother Mike, that, do you not even care what I'm going through? They're scared to death. So they awake him. He says, peace, be still. He rebukes the wind. It's all fixed. And he said unto them, why are you so fearful? How is it that you have no faith? Now here, I'm like, all right. So they're just going to say, Lord, you're right. We're wrong. We'll never be in this place again. Right? That's what I want to believe they would say. Because then I could believe that's what I would do. And everything would be fixed. No, that's not what happens. What happens is they were scared to death. Now, I don't know where you go from scared to death, except to more scared. When they saw the power, when they saw a glimpse of the holiness of God, who they were saying they believed he was. He's the Christ. He's the Messiah. He's the one promised. But when they saw a glimpse of who he was, they were more terrified than before. No, this is the fear that Jesus brings. And it is a good fear. It must be experienced before we will live in the fear that Jesus relieves. Fear is a natural human response to being in the presence of God. When you talk about fear, we usually go into, well, what do you fear? People fear snakes, and they fear spiders, and they fear heights. They fear hurricanes, tornadoes. Some people have a fear of flying. So we can go down all of these phobias. Fear snakes? Well, what is it to fear snakes to be in the presence of the one who created them? Doc, I can tell you when it comes down, if you honestly are asking, well, what do you fear? My fears are simple. I fear failure. I fear the absence of control. And I fear loss. You know what happens when I look at even a glimpse of being in the presence of God? I realize that I am constantly in failure. I'm face to face the fact that I never have control. And you want to talk about loss? Looking at what I'm supposed to be versus what I am. The Bible illustrates this fear that Jesus brings from the beginning all the way to the end. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve hid themselves. They did not want to come out. They were afraid to come out. They were afraid to see. They were afraid to be exposed. They were afraid for those things to be seen and known and dealt with. Middle of the Bible, Isaiah gets a glimpse of the glory of God, and he says, I am undone. I'm ruined. I cannot live in this holiness. I just can't. And you go to the end of the Bible, the very beginning of Revelations, John, the apostle God loved, the one Jesus loved, the one that put his head on his breast, Can there be another soul ever on earth who was closer and more comfortable with Jesus than John? But Revelation chapter 1, verse 17 says, when I saw him, I fell on my face at his feet like I was dead. Fear is a natural response for being in the presence of an almighty God. Fear, this is my favorite definition for fear. Fear can be defined as simply knowing a little of who God is. Seeing a little bit of his character, of his glory, of his power, throw it all together, seeing a little bit of his holiness brings about fear in the unholy. Now, this is the fear that Jesus brings, and like we said, it's a good fear. Every person needs to experience this fear because the Bible teaches us that the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. It's the place where there's no hiding, where there's no deception, where everything is thrown out front, and that is what we don't want to have happen. It is the fear that the apostles had in the boat. Any person that says, I do not fear the Lord, does not know him. This is not a fear that cripples us, however. Rather, it is a fear that makes it possible for us to overcome all other fears. And we'll see that when we get into the other miracles. So we leave this miracle of calming the storm when we go to Mark chapter 5. Oof. I wanted to read this whole chapter, but maybe we'll just read a few verses. When we get into Mark chapter 5, verses 3, 4, and 5, we get to see the man possessed, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no man could bind him, no, not with chains, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder. I like that word. It's a very descriptive word, plucked. I once saw my dad break handcuffs, and it was twist them exactly right, get them exactly right, all this groaning, all this straining on his face. I was still all impressed. I was like, but I remember all that. This does not get the picture of all of that. This gets the picture of plucked. They bound him often. It was a waste of time because every time they did him, it was like nothing to him. Now, this is sounding a little scary. Because he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, didn't just snap them, in pieces. Neither could any man tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. So we get this picture. Here's this man, and he was a problem. Doc, imagine him living just outside your neighborhood. Well, I call the cops. Well, this is what the cops are going to say. Nothing we can do. We put cuffs on him lots of times. He plucks them asunder. Good luck to you. That is the atmosphere these people are living in. He is terrorizing a town. And you can't forget about him because he's just outside howling like a wolf. Making noise, screaming, cutting himself, running around. I mean, this is craziness. This town is terrorized. And then Jesus shows up. And he casts him out. And they come to Jesus, verse 15, and they see him that was possessed with the devil and that had the legion sitting and clothed and in his right mind. Here's the effect that Jesus had as he cast out the demon. Now, here's the perfect place. I would expect the people, much like I would have expected the disciples, Lord, it'll never happen again. I would expect the people to stand up and say, thank you so much. Life will be so much better. Can you stay here? We got a list of other things for you to fix. Doc, really, I'm not being sarcastic. I'm telling you, that's what I would expect. You know, every night I'm afraid for my wife to leave. I'm afraid for my daughter, for my son to step outside. I'm afraid to travel, to buy, to get to. I'm scared to death. Now this is solved. I would think, yes. And they were afraid. And verse 17, and they began to pray him to depart out of their coast. These people were more afraid of the authority of Jesus and what that would mean to their lives than they were of the evil. And so they bid him leave. Leave me alone. Leave me in the evil. Leave me in the darkness. Now, you want a quick glimpse of the picture of our world? More afraid of the authority of God and what that would mean for their own life. You start to witness somebody, first thing they want to do is bargain. Well, do I have to stop? Can I continue? They rejected the light, and they're living in the dark. Now, that is a great difference from the apostles. The result was the same. The result of seeing the power and the holiness of God resulted in great fear. But the disciples stay with him, and they will experience the fear that Jesus relieves. We'll see that in the next two miracles. Jesus is going to relieve fear by giving peace and by giving hope. They bid him leave. He gets in the boat. He casts off. Verse 21, and when Jesus was passed over again by ship unto the other side, much people gathered unto him, and he was nigh unto the sea. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name. Brother Mike, he would be among the group that was denying, that was doubting, but in his desperation when there was nowhere else to go to. And behold, there cometh one of the rulers of the synagogue, Jairus by name, and when he saw him, fell at his feet, and besought him greatly, saying, my little daughter lieth at the point, now we'll find out later, she's 12 years old, and besought him greatly, saying, my little daughter lieth at the point of death. I pray thee, come and lay thy hands on her, that she may be healed, and she shall live. So we get this picture. There's a large crowd. He goes over to the other side. In the middle of this crowd, in the middle of Jesus being Jesus, a leader of the synagogue comes and he pleads and he begs, my daughter is near to death. Near, not dead, near to death. If you would just come, if you would just lay your hands on her, teacher, you can. And so he begins to go. Verse 28. Along the way, verse 25, and a certain woman which had an issue of blood 12 years, verse 28, for she had said, if I may touch but his clothes, I shall be whole. So, Doug, here they are in this big crowd, and they're going to Jairus' house, and everybody hears this, and they're all waiting to see another miracle. Jesus is going to heal again, and this is just going to change everything, and I'm going to tell everyone I saw it. And so all this whole crowd is going, and along the way, there's a woman who's been sick for 12 years. And she says, if I could just but touch him. This is my one shot. If I could just touch him. Verse 29. And straightway, the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that plague. Doctor, she just touches him. And immediately, she's healed. And Jesus, immediately knowing in himself that virtue had gone out of him, turned about the press and said, who touched my clothes? And his disciples are saying, are you crazy? Who hasn't? Everybody here is trying to get close to you. And the disciples said unto him, thou seest the multitude thronging thee, and thou sayest, who touched me? Yeah, you thought I was being... No, that's exactly what's going on in there. Yes? And he stopped and didn't give it up. He wants to know who it is. And he looked round about to see her that had done this thing. Now, he's calling her out, and he stops the crowd, and he begins to look to her. And right now, only one person in this crowd knows who it is, and it's her. And you know what she is? She's afraid. But the woman, fearing and trembling, knowing what was done in her, came and fell down before him and told him all the truth. It's the response. The response to being around a holy God is fear and trembling. But notice this fear and trembling responded differently. Doc, she didn't say go. She didn't hide. She came. He bid her come, and she came. And you know what he does to the whole world? He bids them come. He bid her come, and she does. And look at how he responds. Fear and trembling. And he said unto her, Daughter, thy faith hath made thee whole. And here's what he does. Go in peace, and be whole of thy plague. He meets her fear and trembling, and bids her, gives her, pushes to her peace. No. Doug, this is just me. Why would she be so afraid? Well, Doug, think, she did this whole thing in secret. She didn't want to go talk to him. She didn't want to step out in front of him. What did she say? If I could just sneak in there and just touch him. And he said, who did this? Come out. Be made known. She wasn't able to hide from him. You know what we can't do? We can't hide from him. He wants everything to be made known. In front of me, I know. There's something about, he knows her. Then you know what's so fearful about a holy God? I can't hide from him. Donnie, he knows my thoughts. He knows my intents. He knows me. I can't control. I can't manipulate. I can't bargain. I can put on an act here. I can put forth an image, Doug, but not to him. But when she obeyed, when he said come, and she did, he said go in peace. And that's what Jesus says to us. For those who will trust and obey, he gives us peace. There is a fear that he brings. It made her come. There is a fear that relieves after we come, and he gave her peace. We sing this all the time, by the way. This may be the most famous hymn ever. And in this hymn we hear, "'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and it was grace my fears relieved." He died to take away our guilt and our shame and to give us peace with God and peace of God. And that is how he wants us to live. But that comes from letting go of control. That comes from surrender and trust. I'm stepping out of the hiding and saying, in submission, I'll follow. In my life. Rob, in my life, there have been many times, that God has brought me to the place where something I wanted so much You just don't understand. See, Rob, you just don't get it. This thing needs to work out exactly this way. This is the only way. It just had to be. Doc, I was scared to death that it wouldn't be. I can tell you the first time. The first time was when I heard my wife is pregnant. Now, Miss Tammy, that makes women go, oh, I'm so happy for you. That makes guys, oh, we're happy. But immediately I thought, oh, I hope my wife is okay. Hope my child's okay. Immediately I thought of, what if? Doc, I love her with everything in me. What if I lose her? Now that could happen any day, but this just brings it to reality. There's been time after time after time where it's something good that I wanted to happen my way. And when I want it to happen and I try to control it, this is what I realize. There's nothing I can do. And there is no peace until you get to the place that you let it go. And done. Then there's a peace. It's not an easy peace, but there's a peace. And the second thing there is there becomes hope. Equally wonderful to the peace that God gives is the hope that he brings. Remember, they're on their way to Jairus' house. There is now a delay. He's dealing with this woman. That is a delay. Verse 35, while he yet spake, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, thy daughter is dead. Why troublest thou the master any further? Do you understand what that is? That is, leave him alone, there's no more hope. Verse 36, as soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he saith unto the ruler of the synagogue. Now, Doc, his daughter just died. He just learned that his daughter died. At first, I'm like, these words don't fit. You know what his answer is? Be not afraid. Not don't grieve, not cheer up, not be not afraid. Why do you tell the man who just learned that his daughter died, don't be afraid? Because you know what comes in when hope is gone? Fear. Fear grows where hope is gone. And hope just left. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't let fear win. Don't live in fear. And we get to see the most amazing miracle yet. Verse 42, and straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of the age of 12 years, and they were astonished with great astonishment. Doc, we live in an evil world. We live in a world where there will be death. And when there is death, for those of us who live with the King, there will be a delay, just like there was in this story. But there will also be a resurrection. And that is what he says. Don't live in fear. Don't lose hope. We here have to live in the grief of this delay. But we are encouraged to live in the hope of the return of the King. So what's the kingdom going to look like? It's a place of no storms. It's a place of no evil. It's a place of no sickness. And it'll be a place of no death, no aging, no weakness. when we come face to face, even in a glimpse with the living God, there will be a fear that he brings. This fear will cause us to hide, or it will cause us to come to him. Those who come to him will receive the fear that he relieves. And that is how, in this evil world now, we live. We start today living our life in the power of his rule, in the trust of him. And that's going to give us the blessing of the fears that he relieves. That's the only way to live. Doc, you close in a word of prayer, please.
Father, we do thank and praise you